In 41 years on this bench, I have seen a lot of things. I have watched people weep, manipulate, invent every possible excuse to avoid a fine they clearly owed. I have heard stories designed to move me that were constructed entirely from self-interest. After 4 decades, very little surprises me. But one morning, an 81-year-old man walked through my courtroom door with a worn wooden cane and a parking ticket. And before he left, every person in that room was in tears, including me. If you believe that justice is sometimes less about the law and more about being willing to listen, subscribe right now. Because what this old man carried into my courtroom that morning was not a defense. It was a debt. 56 years old, finally ready to be paid. The case file was routine, a parking citation issued outside a Veterans Affairs medical center. The defendant, an 81-year-old man, had left his vehicle in a restricted loading zone for 49 minutes. The fine was $80 plus court costs. I expected to be done in 15 minutes. Then the door opened. He moved slowly, with great effort. His cane was wooden, worn smooth along the grip from years of daily use. His suit was old, dark gray wool that had probably looked distinguished decades ago, now hanging loosely over a frame thinned by age. But his tie was knotted with absolute precision, and his shoes, cracked along the creases from years of wear, had been polished until they shone. I have seen a lot of people walk through that door. Some carry arrogance, some carry fear. Some carry the rehearsed performance of a person who has already decided what they plan to say. This man carried dignity, the quiet, deliberate kind. The kind shaped by a life that has already been through things a courtroom cannot touch. He stood before my bench and waited without fidgeting. "Mr. Coleman," I said, "you are here regarding a parking citation outside the VA Medical Center. The record shows your vehicle was left in a restricted loading zone for 49 minutes. Is that accurate?" "Yes, Your Honor," he said. His voice was soft, unhurried, the voice of a person with nothing to hide and no interest in performing. "Can you walk me through what happened that day?" He glanced briefly at his hands. Then he raised his eyes to mine. They were gray-green and deeply tired. Not the tired that comes from a bad night's sleep, the tired that accumulates over a lifetime and never fully leaves. "I was there to see someone, Your Honor," he said simply. "At the VA hospital?" "Yes, ma'am." The citation notes available parking spaces roughly 90 yards from the entrance. "Why the loading zone?" He drew a slow breath. "I needed to be close," he said. "Right there at that entrance. Now." I have spent over 4 decades behind this bench. I have heard grief used as a strategy and sympathy manufactured for effect. I know the difference between a story being told and a truth being released. This was a truth being released, slowly, at some cost to the man releasing it. "Tell me who you were visiting," I said. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. His name was Master Sergeant Harold Pewitt, Your Honor. He was 79 years old. A pause. "He passed away 6 hours after my visit that day." The courtroom went still, the kind of stillness that falls when a room full of strangers all feel the same thing at the same moment. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said. "Was Sergeant Pewitt a close friend?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you needed to be near the entrance because you knew he was dying?" "Yes, Your Honor." Most judges in my position would have stopped right there, dismissed the ticket, called it compassion, and moved on. But I have learned over 40 years that the first answer almost never contains the whole truth. There is always another layer. And something about the way this man held his cane, the particular set of his shoulders, told me I had barely reached the surface. "Mr. Coleman," I said, "how did you come to know Sergeant Pewitt?" He was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that isn't hesitation, it's preparation. "We served together, Your Honor." "In the military?" "Yes, ma'am, United States Army." "Which conflict?" "Korea first, Your Honor, then Vietnam." I have deep respect for those who wore that uniform. When he said those words, every instinct I had wanted to tear up that citation on the spot. But I could feel there was more, something still unspoken, still held back behind careful eyes. When did you serve? I enlisted in 1960, Your Honor. I was 18. 2 tours, Korea first, then Vietnam, from 1965 through 1968. And Sergeant Pute served with you throughout? Same unit in Vietnam, Your Honor. 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry, 1st Cavalry Division. He recited those numbers the way a man recites the names of people he has lost. Not from memory, from somewhere deeper. That kind of service builds strong bonds, I said. Yes, Your Honor. And you remained close all these years? He looked down again. His hands were trembling harder now. No, Your Honor. A pause long enough to feel. I had not spoken to Harold Pute in 49 years. Not once. Not until September 9th, when I walked into his room at the VA. The courtroom stirred. 49 years. And he had appeared on the very day the man died. I sat with that for a moment before continuing. Mr. Coleman, I said carefully, help me understand. You served in the same unit, and then 49 years of complete silence. How did you even know he was dying? His obituary, Your Honor. He said it quietly. The local paper ran it 4 days early by mistake. It said he was in hospice care at the VA, that he was not expected to last the week. And that brought you to him. Not just that, Your Honor. He paused. The obituary said something else. He stopped, drew a breath. It said he was a hero. It described an ambush in March of 1967 near the Adrang Valley. It said Harold Pute had thrown himself over 4 soldiers when a grenade landed in their position, that he absorbed the shrapnel across his left side so those 4 men could survive, that he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for what he did that day. I heard something shifting in his voice, something tightly held, beginning to give. That must have filled you with tremendous pride, I said, reading about your friend's bravery. It did, Your Honor. A pause. And it made me understand I had no time left. Why, Mr. Coleman? After 49 years, why then? The old man closed his eyes. His chest rose and fell once, deliberately, like a man steadying himself at the edge of something he cannot step back from. When he opened them again, there were tears collecting at the corners. Not spilling, just waiting, because I was one of those 4 men, Your Honor. The silence that followed was absolute, complete and total. Harold Pute threw himself over me on March 2nd, 1967. Over me and 3 other men. We had taken cover in a drainage trench during an ambush. A grenade landed less than 2 feet from where we were huddled. He had to stop. He breathed through it. Harold saw it. He did not hesitate. He covered it with his body and took the blast so we would not. His voice steadied by sheer will. He survived because the trench deflected part of the force, and 2 other men in the unit reached him quickly. But he lost partial hearing in his left ear, and he carried shrapnel in his side for the rest of his life. He stopped again. He carried it so I would not have to carry anything at all. I sat very still, and you never thanked him. It came out softer than I intended. No, Your Honor, I did not. But you were in the same unit. You saw him every day after that. I did, Your Honor, for 4 months before I was rotated home. I saw him at meals, at roll call. I watched other men clap him on the back and call him a legend. He looked down at his hands, and I walked past him every single time. I never said a word. Why? Because I was ashamed, Your Honor. Of what? Of surviving because of someone else, of needing to be protected. His voice dropped nearly to nothing. I was 23 years old. I thought a real soldier didn't need shielding. I thought if I acknowledged what he did, I was admitting I was weak, that I was the reason someone got hurt. He steadied himself. So I told myself I would reach out later, after the war, once I was home, once I had sorted myself out. A long pause. But later never came. Pride kept me quiet. And then the years kept passing. The tears were moving now, slowly, down the deep lines of his face. He did not move to stop them. When I saw that obituary, he continued, I understood I had run completely out of time. I drove to the VA, I parked at the entrance because my hip replacement means I cannot walk long distances without significant pain, and I did not know how many minutes Harold had left. He paused, so I went straight in. And you found him? Room 218, Your Honor. He was by the window. His voice broke slightly, then recovered. The man I remembered as broad and strong had been reduced to something that barely pressed into the mattress. But his eyes, he stopped. His eyes were exactly the same. Alert, steady, present. He let that sit for a moment. I stood at the foot of his bed. I said, Harold, it's Walter Coleman, 2nd Battalion, 1967. And he looked at me. He really looked at me. Then he smiled. The courtroom was motionless. I am not sure any of us were breathing. I walked to his bedside, Mr. Coleman continued, and I said, Harold, I came here to tell you something I should have said 56 years ago. You threw yourself on that grenade for me. You took that shrapnel so I could go home and watch my children grow up, so I could hold my grandchildren, so I could have a life that you made possible with your body. He swallowed hard. And I am here because you deserve to hear from the man you saved that it mattered, that it changed everything, that I never forgot, not for a single day, even when I was too much of a coward to say so. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket with trembling hands and withdrew a photograph, worn pale at the creases, bent along one edge from decades of being carried close to the body. He held it up. 2 young men in uniform, arms thrown over each other's shoulders, squinting into bright sunlight, grinning with the particular ease of people who do not yet know what is coming. That is me and Harold, he said. January 1967, 8 weeks before the ambush. We thought we were going to walk through that war untouched. He placed it carefully back against his chest. I stayed with Harold for 49 minutes that day, Your Honor. That is why the ticket reads 49 minutes. He looked at me steadily. 1 minute for every year I should have reached out and did not. The woman in the 3rd row had come in for her own citation that morning. She had covered her mouth with both hands. We talked about the men we had been, Mr. Coleman said. We laughed about foolish things we did that seemed important at the time. I held his hand. When the nurse came and said visiting hours needed to end, I leaned close and I said, Harold, you are the bravest person I have ever known, and I am going to make sure people know what you did. I am going to say your name out loud for the rest of whatever time I have. He paused. He squeezed my hand. He said, a breath. Walter, I knew you'd come eventually. I always figured you just needed time. I had to look away from him for a moment. Harold died 6 hours after I left, Your Honor. A nurse called me that evening. She said he went quietly, without distress. She said he seemed peaceful in a way he hadn't been earlier in the week. He steadied himself one final time. She told me the last thing he said before he lost consciousness was my name. She said he smiled when he said it. I looked down at the citation on my desk. $80, 49 minutes. One man returning decades too late, and somehow exactly on time. Your Honor, Mr. Coleman said, his voice quiet and level, I will pay the fine. I broke the rule. I will not argue otherwise. But I need you to understand that those 49 minutes were worth any amount you could name. I would pay it 1,000 times over because I finally said the words. I finally looked Harold Pewitt in the eye and told him that what he did was not invisible, that someone who was there remembered and was grateful. The clerk was crying. The bailiff was crying. The woman in the 3rd row had given up pretending she was not, and I was crying. I do not say that lightly. I have presided over cases involving tremendous suffering. I have learned to maintain composure as a matter of professional necessity. I have delivered verdicts that changed lives and held my expression steady through all of it. But this old man, with his polished, cracked shoes and his trembling hands and his worn photograph pressed against his heart, dissolved something I did not know could be dissolved after 41 years on this bench. I picked up the citation. "Mr. Coleman," I said, "I have spent more than 4 decades in this role, and in that time I have come to understand something law school does not teach you. Honor is not a concept. It is not a word you put on a plaque. It is a choice made repeatedly, often at great personal cost, often without any witness at all." I looked at him directly. Harold Pewitt made that choice on March 2nd, 1967. He made it with his body. He made it knowing exactly what it would cost him. I held up the citation. "And on September 9th, you made your own choice. You drove to that hospital. You parked at that entrance. You walked into that room, and you gave a dying man the one thing that had been missing from his story for 49 years. I paused. A witness, someone who could say, "I was there. I know what you did, and it was not invisible." I tore the citation cleanly in half. "This ticket is dismissed. The fine is vacated. Case closed." Mr. Coleman's knees softened. The bailiff, a former Navy man, moved to his side without being asked. "Your Honor," Mr. Coleman said, "I broke the rule. I want to pay." "You have already paid," I told him. "You paid with 49 years of carrying something that was never really yours to carry. Consider the debt settled." That was not where the story ended. Before he reached the door, I called after him. "You told Harold you would make sure people knew what he did. Did you mean that?" He turned. "With everything I have, Your Honor." "Then let us do it together." Over the following weeks, we contacted the local news. We reached out to the Veterans Affairs Office. We located Harold Pewitt's son, Marcus, who had grown up hearing fragments of his father's war stories, but had never known the names of the men his father had protected. On a cool October morning, a dedication ceremony was held at the VA Medical Center. A bronze plaque was installed near the main entrance, in the corridor closest to where Mr. Coleman had parked his car that September afternoon. More than 175 people attended: veterans, active duty service members, Gold Star families, and civilians who had simply read about the ceremony and felt they could not stay away. I was asked to speak. I told them about the parking ticket. I told them about 49 minutes, about 49 years of silence, and one old man who finally found the courage to break it. Mr. Coleman spoke as well. He stood at that podium with his cane and his photograph and read aloud a letter he had written to Harold Pewitt. In it, he described what Harold's sacrifice had made possible: the children, the grandchildren, the ordinary mornings that only existed because Harold had not looked away. And he made a promise. "I will not let your story end with you," he read. "I will carry it. I will say your name. I will make sure that anyone willing to listen understands what you did, what it cost you, and why it mattered." Harold's son Marcus embraced him when he finished. He said his father had spoken about the ambush over the years, but always deflected when anyone called him brave. He said his father used to say that a person does not think in those moments. They just move. Marcus said that knowing the names of the men his father had protected, knowing that one of them had come to the hospital room at the very end, changed something in him. "It means my father didn't die waiting," he said. The ceremony ended with a rifle salute. The sound carried across the parking lot and dissolved into the October air. Afterward, Mr. Coleman found me and took my hand in both of his. "Your Honor," he said, "you could have processed that ticket in 2 minutes and sent me home. Instead, you listened. And because you listened, Harold got a plaque. His son got a story. And I got to put down something I have been carrying since I was 23 years old. Mr. Coleman," I told him, "you did all of it. You made the drive. You walked into that room. You said the words. I just refused to rush you." He shook his head slightly. "I just wish I had not waited so long." "I understand that," I said, "but here is what 41 years in this courtroom has taught me. It is never too late to do the right thing. It is never too late to say thank you. The timing wasn't perfect, but you got there, and it was enough." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I have thought about nearly every day since. "Harold told me something in that room. He said he was not afraid of dying. He said he had lived a good life, And he knew it because every morning when he woke up, he thought about the fact that somewhere 4 men were also waking up. He said that knowledge was enough, that it made all the rest of it make sense. He looked at me steadily. I want to live like that, Your Honor. I want to spend whatever years I have left making sure that the men and women in those wards know they are not forgotten, that someone remembers that their service meant something to a real person who was still here because of people like them. He has kept that promise. In the months since the ceremony, Walter Coleman has visited more than 60 veterans across care facilities in the region. He brings the photograph every time. He tells the story, and then he listens. That is what I carry with me from that case, not the paperwork, not the procedure. The understanding that behind every violation, every citation, every file number, there is a human being with a history. And sometimes that history contains something so large, so quietly devastating, so long unspoken, that the only just response is to stop and give it room. I have dismissed thousands of citations in my career. I will not forget this one. I will not forget 49 minutes in room 218. I will not forget 49 years of shame that was never truly deserved, carried anyway, and the moment it was finally set down. Harold Pute. These are not footnotes. They are the reasons some of us are still here. And one old man with a worn cane and cracked leather shoes and a photograph pressed against his heart made sure the world knew it. Think of someone who deserves to hear thank you from you. Not eventually, today. Make the call, write the message, show up at the door, because the people who saved us, in whatever way they saved us, deserve to know it while they are still here to hear it. If that matters to you, share this story. It took 56 years to be told the first time. Let's make sure it doesn't take that long to reach the people who need it.